We got to talk about the Jayson Tatum slander that we see all over X, we see all over ESPN, that apparently Jaylen Brown is better than Jayson Tatum, according to Kendrick Perkins. And I'm just here to say, you know what? Enough is enough. Tatum is in his second NBA Finals. You can say he's had all this help, he's been carried, but at the end of the day, you still have to go out and execute. If you don't like him for that, well, how would you guys feel if Luka Doncic had that roster? Would you have that same energy towards Luka and always being carried by his role players? Even though Jayson Tatum is scoring 26 points per game in his playoffs, 10.4 rebounds, 5.9 assists per game. In the Eastern Conference Finals, he had 30 points, 10.3 rebounds a game, and 6.3 assists per game. That's what he did in the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, I think Jaylen Brown did deserve the MVP, and shout out to Jaylen Brown. He was phenomenal. But what's up with this hate for Jayson Tatum? I get it. He didn't show up in the NBA Finals in 2022, and I do hold him to a high standard. But at the same time, I think we've gone too far with the hate towards Tatum. Yes, Anthony Edwards is an amazing basketball player, but the guy is 22 years old, and he has struggled against the Mavericks. He was really good last night, but I don't see that series going past 6 games. And Anthony Edwards needs to show me he can do it the next year. We saw SGA, who was phenomenal in these playoffs. What happened? They lost in the second round in 6 games. Can OKC continue to win at a high level? Jayson Tatum's been doing this since he was a rookie. Now, was that team when he was a rookie really good? No, they were just babies. But once he started to grow and become the leader of this team, gets the Eastern Conference Finals when they're in the bubble. Comes back the next year, Jaylen Brown gets hurt. It was a rough year for Boston. They finished 7th. Tatum had a great game against Brooklyn in Game 3, and then they lost in 5. We come back a year later, they struggle out the gates. But Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum figure things out with Marcus Smart, Al Horford in the gang, and they get to the NBA Finals. Did Jayson Tatum play well in the Finals? No, he did not. Was he inconsistent last year in the playoffs? I would say yes. But when you needed Tatum to step up, he did. You look at the Game 6 against Philly. He was terrible. But in the last 5 minutes, he wins that game for them. And then you go to Game 7, drops 51 points against the MVP of the Philadelphia 76ers and Joel Embiid. We can nitpick Tatum, and I understand like some of the criticism is warranted because he's 26. He's got to do it in the NBA Finals because I cannot take him, having a disappearing act. Early on in the playoffs, he was, a little sluggish. But after Game 2 against the Cavs, he's been solid. He had one game. It was Game 2 against Indiana. He had 4 points in the first half, I should say. Then had 19 in the second half. And then the reason is, the comp isn't that good. I mean, I don't know what you want from this guy. I do want to play the clip with Uncut Hoops because I want to get into this some more. And shout out to Uncut Hoops because I love the way he broke this down. Let's go ahead and get right into this.
And at times, we keep wondering, when is JT going to arrive? When can we put his name in the conversation with Luka and Anthony Edwards and things of that nature? Was he the best player on the floor last night? Hell no, he wasn't. And look, I understand he had, 36 last night, 12 rebounds. He should have had 50.
You went full retard, man. Never go full retard.
When it comes to superstar players in this year's postseason, nobody's been more critiqued and nitpicked than Jayson Tatum. And at first, it was minor critiques that were valid. His shot was off, he was missing threes. Stuff like that was valid and plainly obvious. But the further we advanced in the playoffs, the more Tatum was nitpicked, the goalposts were moved, and the hate increased tenfold. And by the time we reached Game 1 of the East Finals, you had someone like Kendrick Perkins saying Jaylen Brown is actually better than Tatum and the best player on both.
Yo, can we just stop with the whole who's better between Tatum and Brown and just appreciate how good they are as basketball players? They both do different things on the basketball court, and they complement each other in their own way. And I think that's fine. We should just leave it there instead of saying, oh, Jaylen Brown is better than Tatum because he had a 40 ball in Game 2 and Tatum should have got a 50 ball in Game 1. When you actually, if you watch the game, obviously Tatum didn't do well in the fourth quarter, but then in overtime he redeemed himself in that last minute and 15 of the game. Saying that Tatum should have got 50, and let's say he did get 50 last Game 1. I wonder how much scrutiny Tatum would have got. I'm just curious because Perkins over here, saying that, oh, well, Tatum should have scored all these points. And the reality is he still had 36. When is 36 not good? I don't get that.
What
Yeah.
statement did Jaylen Brown make?
What statement he's been trying to make all postseason long? That he's the best player on the Boston Celtics.
Perkins' level of hate for Tatum at this point, it's reaching Skip Bayless, LeBron type levels. As now Perkins saying Brown is actually a better overall player. Even looking at Perkins' takes from a week ago, it disproves that on its own. As when it came to Big Perk's top 5 players with the most pressure on them, who was on that list? Jayson Tatum at number 1. And quite possibly the dumbest take of the playoffs came after Game 1 versus Indiana. Now to remind you guys, Tatum this game, 36 points, 12 boards, 4 assists, a great all-around game. Now yes, Jaylen in the fourth quarter had that clutch 3 in the corner, which saved the game. That was crucial, a great shot, props to Jaylen. But Tatum in overtime, this dude took over and scored a game-high 10 points. Now Boston winning this game, Tatum playing fantastic, being great in OT, them snatching a victory from the jaws of defeat. What was Perkins' big brain take the next day?
Was he the best player on the floor last night? Hell no, he wasn't. And look, I understand he had, 36 last night, 12 rebounds. He should have had 50.
I want you guys to wrap your heads around this. Perkins' standards for Tatum is scoring 50 points in the East Finals. In all of NBA history, only 2 players ever have scored 50-plus points in the conference finals.
And that's where the double standard is when it comes to the critiques of Jayson Tatum. If Luka Doncic has 36 points, and let's just say it's the same scenario, that Kyrie Irving hits a 3 to lead them into overtime, and Luka takes over in the last 2 minutes of the basketball game, are they having those same conversations? We just have to be objective here. And I think when it comes to Jayson Tatum, yes, he does need to win a championship. But to put James Harden 5th under the most pressure when he hasn't even been to the NBA Finals is crazy to me. And again, I'm not here to say Boston isn't under any pressure, that Tatum isn't under any at all, but he's 26. So obviously there's still time for him to win a championship. Yes, he did fail in the NBA Finals. We can acknowledge that. But we can also say he'll probably be back there next year and maybe the year after because they locked up Jrue Holiday. They're probably going to lock up Derek White. As long as Jaylen Brown and Tatum are together, they have all this experience of being in the conference finals and now their second NBA Finals appearance. It's more than likely they're going to kick the door down. We'll see. But I just think saying, oh, he should have scored 50 when the reality is, well, he still hit the big shots in overtime to get them over that game 1 hump. It was not an easy game for them, but they overcame that adversity. And people have asked, the Boston Celtics, can they be clutch? That's been a big thing. Tatum hit the shot to put him up 4. You can say, oh, well, it was a step back 3. Well, he still hit the shot. If Luka does that, everybody's going crazy. And I love Luka Doncic. And that's not misconstrued everything. I think Luka is better than Jayson Tatum. I do think that. I just want to make sure we're objective about everything. And now, obviously, there's going to be biases. And that's something you can't get, away from. And my favorite players right now is, Luka Doncic. It's Wembanyama. It's Jayson Tatum. It's Ben Caro. I got 2 other guys. Jokic. I love Nikola Jokic. There's one more guy. I can't remember his name at the top of my head. Anthony Edwards, right? Those are my 6 guys right now. I'm probably going to have some bias towards them, right? But at the same time, I think when we're looking at Tatum and we're judging him on this LeBron James standard, I'm just thinking, what are we doing here? Let's just appreciate the process of a basketball player. That's really what I want to get at. So let's just appreciate how they're growing and getting better. But, the media wants to push their narratives and agendas, and this is where we're at.
That being Dirk in 06 and Michael Jordan in 1993. Like I said earlier, the standard Perkins holds Tatum to is unrealistic, even for the best number 1 options in NBA history. But simultaneously, we'll say Jaylen Brown is the best player, despite Tatum having all the pressure expectations and supposedly having to drop 50. And one thing that does frustrate me is that Jaylen Brown in all these debates is really being used as a pawn. These guys don't like Jaylen, appreciate him, or recognize his game when they can't slander Tatum off his great game. And despite Kendrick Perkins being an absolute moron, his narrative after Game 1 spread like wildfire, as even Shannon Sharp, wrongly so, was saying Jaylen Brown was Boston's best player.
Right. Jaylen Brown has been their most consistent player throughout these playoffs. If you go back and look at game in the first round series, the second round series, and now this one with an opportunity to advance, Jaylen Brown has been their best player.
Maybe I'm too young, a little naive, but I've never seen the media pit two superstars against each other in the playoffs. And speaking as a
And that's my thing when it comes to these Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum takes is why can't we just appreciate who they are as basketball players? Jaylen Brown is good at what he does. Jayson Tatum is good at what he does. Sure, Jayson Tatum, it'd be nice if he doesn't disappear in the fourth quarter. Would love to see him step it up a little bit more. But we also should give him credit when he does hit big shots because he did hit that big shot against Indiana. I don't care if Neesmith was fouled out. He still had to hit the shot, and he did. But we want to spin this and go, well, Jaylen Brown doesn't make that three. Of course, he had to make that three, but Tatum still closed the door. Two things can be true. And then the other thing I don't like is when, fans and the media try to prop other players up, like Anthony Edwards, and he does deserve his flowers. But what's happened in the Western Conference Finals? He has struggled. Now, he had a good game last night, but he's had trouble, figuring out Dallas's defense. And people are turning on him, saying Ant is as good as advertised, when the reality is he's 22 years old. I'm not going to criticize a guy in his first Western Conference Finals and just, leave him on the side and say, I'm done with him. I'm not going to do that. Where I critique him, yes. But I think Anthony Edwards is going to be better as a basketball player next year. Like, let's relax. But to say he's better than Tatum when his resume is smaller is premature. We have to see the rest of his career play out. And again, I think, could he end up being better than Tatum? Yeah, I can admit that. But I still need to see it. So I think that's where the issues I have is where, Tatum is in this weird spot where he's made multiple conference finals. He's made the NBA finals, and people are expecting him to just be the best player, and it hasn't happened yet. And maybe it's going to take him some more time. Everybody has a different process when it comes to being, great and being a top 5 player in the league. Everybody is in a different lane. And that's perfectly okay.
Celtics fan, the goal of this team is winning a championship. I don't care if Tatum averages 30, Brown averages 20, or Brown averages 30, Tatum averages 20. This team for the past 5 years has a knock on the door of a championship. However they get it done, I really could care less about. And very quickly to debunk Shannon's point that Jaylen in these playoffs has been better. Look at Tatum in the last 6 games versus Jaylen in his last 6 games. And for context, Boston right now has played 12 games in the postseason. So looking at Tatum's numbers the second half of this playoff run, 31 points per game, 10 boards, 6 dimes, nearly 2 steals.
Tatum has better numbers except the true shooting percentage, if you want to nitpick that stat. But again, they both are great at what they do. All that matters is for Boston, they want to win a championship. I don't think it matters, what they've done at this point anyways. I don't know why people are so caught up with their playoff form, and everybody expected them in the NBA Finals to begin with. They've been knocking at the door, like you said here. So everyone's just saying, okay, even if and here's my thing, even if Tatum was, let's say he was averaging 35, he was at 12 rebounds and 9 assists. What are we going to say? Oh, good job. We expected that. Like, no surprise. That's going to be the energy. Do it in the NBA Finals. That's what they're going to say. So Tatum can't win here. I think at the end of the day, we just need to appreciate the process. We could still criticize. I think we could definitely do that, but we shouldn't take it too far. Like, I've seen takes where people say Tatum isn't a top 10 player. I'm like, you guys are dumb. You don't know basketball. You just don't know it enough, and you don't really think about the process of a player getting better. There's just too many agendas out there. Again, I think Luka is better than Jayson Tatum. I have my reasons why. I think he's a more polished offensive player. Defensively, I think Tatum is better. But I just value Luka's offense more than I value Tatum's offense. I can still say Tatum is a great player. Like, I just don't get that. The biases and the agendas are just nasty. But you see here, Tatum's been solid.
And the last thing I do want to address is the Ant versus Tatum debate. As this debate early in the playoffs, the Anthony Edwards fans are very vocal, very loud, that Edwards finally is better than Tatum, and a top 7-ish player. Some were saying top 5. Now, of course, Edwards in a very short time went from a great story, a great player who's on the rise, to now 2 weeks later, just being overrated and kind of tossed to the side. And of course, Edwards is a great player. But you know who ruined all this? The NBA media. They try to anoint Anthony Edwards ahead of guys like Tatum, Luka, guys who have been there, done that for years on end. That's not Ant's fault, but the media anointing this guy prematurely. That's on them.
And I'm telling you right now, if Anthony Edwards comes back next year and they lose again in the Western Conference Finals, the media is going to do the same thing they're doing to Jayson Tatum. And to the fans out there who support Anthony Edwards, are you going to stick with him as he goes through the process? Because we got to realize, 22-year-olds aren't winning NBA championships. It's an anomaly. Kobe had Shaq. Wade was an anomaly. You don't see it often. So if Anthony Edwards comes back next year, let's just say he loses in the second round. Are we going to criticize him? Are we going to say, he's not really that guy? Or are we going to say, you know what? Give him some time. He's 23 years old. He's still getting better as a basketball player. That's what I'm going to say. Sure, we can criticize him, but let's not go too far. Because I'm telling you, people will turn on Anthony Edwards if he goes out and performs this way next year in the Western Conference Finals, because they're going to start to say, well, you're really maybe you're just not that guy. Maybe you're not the Michael Jordan we wanted you to be. And then they just move on to the next player. And I just think that's ridiculous. Anthony Edwards at 26 is going to be a much better player, in my opinion. Obviously, his playmaking needs to improve, but the Timberwolves did win last night, and Anthony Edwards does deserve a lot of credit. He played really well. And I think Minnesota has a good shot at pushing it to at least 6 games. Wouldn't be surprised if they lose tomorrow. But at the end of the day, it's his first Western Conference Finals appearance. Luka has been here before. Jason Kidd as a coach has been here before. He also won a championship. So we got to just slow this down and just let players go through their process. Let them learn. Minnesota, again, I think they're a great team. And people say they're not. They don't know basketball. They have a championship level defense. I think they need to get better on the offensive side of the ball and really improve their playmaking. That is a weakness in my opinion. Mike Conley is a good point guard, but I think it'd be a good idea to get a backup point guard or another point guard in there just to run better sets on the offensive side of the ball. That's what Minnesota needs to work on. They need to figure out if Karl-Anthony Towns is a number 2 option. That's something they're going to have to ask themselves as they go through this process. But again, we need to just slow down and let these guys mature. And Anthony Edwards would be just fine if we just keep that energy. But I'm telling you right now, if he does flop in the Western Conference next year and doesn't perform well, the media is going to turn on him. And it's sad because it shouldn't be that way.
But I think he is a notch below the absolute superstars of Embiid, Giannis, Jokic, and now Anthony Edwards. Maybe Tatum can change it if they somehow got over the hump and won it this year. I don't see them doing that. But yeah, Edwards has surpassed. And let's face it, before the off-the-court problems, Ja Morant had passed Jayson Tatum.
And like I said in my previous video, the media excuses for Anthony Edwards, they wouldn't fly.
So notice how Ja Morant is going through some personal things right now, and the media has turned on him. Now they're bringing him down a little bit. Don't think they won't do that to Anthony Edwards. And Ja Morant is a superstar. Don't make any mistakes about that. He is going to come back with a vengeance this year. He started really well on his comeback tour, and unfortunately he had his injury, but I think Ja Morant is going to shut up a lot of people next year, and I'm excited for Ja Morant. But again, we can't prop up players too soon because they're going to go through their playoff failures. That is a normal thing. I don't understand why we get so surprised by this. We shouldn't prop up players too soon. We have to look at them and go, okay, Anthony Edwards is struggling, yes, but he's still a superstar who is only going to get better and better. And even if he loses next year in the Western Conference playoffs, does it make him a bad player? No, he's maturing. I just don't like the fact that we try to push, again, they're pushing Tatum to the side. And you heard Broussard saying, like, oh, the Celtics aren't going to get it done this year. Okay, well, if Boston does win the championship, oh my goodness, 2 things are going to happen here. They're going to give them a love, but then there's going to be excuses from the fans. Oh, they played the Dallas Mavericks. They had an easy run to the finals. That would be the narrative for the Celtics. It would be a Mickey Mouse run. Sort of like, what the Warriors went through. When they went through all these injuries and people are like, oh, they're not as good as advertised. They came back and made the NBA Finals. So if Boston does end up winning, I wouldn't be surprised if they're even more motivated next year to prove a point. They are running the league, and there's nothing you can do about it. But those are just my thoughts.
Like I said in my previous video, the media excuses for Anthony Edwards, they wouldn't fly for Tatum or Luka at the age of 22. Him, quote-unquote, being exhausted, only being 22, never having been there before. Those excuses don't fly if you're a top 5 or top 3 player like they claimed 2 weeks ago. And there's the crux of my argument. Anthony Edwards in his life was better than Tatum for a total of 2.5 weeks, the start of the postseason. Now, the second half of the playoffs, Jayson Tatum, 31 points per game, 10 boards, 6 dimes, 2 steals. You know the stats. Now, Anthony Edwards, still really good numbers, production, still playing relatively well. But compared to his early playoff production, when he was 30 points per game really every single night, this version of Ant Edwards 2 weeks later, not even the same galaxy. And watching Game 2 of the West Finals, Edwards down the stretch had some really big-time blunders, and the biggest one being that pass to Nas Reed that went out of bounds. If Jayson Tatum made that pass in a playoff game, it would be DEFCON 4, all hands on ship. It's an all assault on him as an NBA player. I mean, it would be
And that's the thing which I'm worried about with Anthony Edwards. Right now, he's getting a pass, but as the playoffs go on and his career, moves forward, he's going to get criticized. I'm just going to stick with him because I think he's phenomenal. Just like I'm going to stick with Jayson Tatum because I think Tatum eventually he's going to break through. I just don't know when. And hopefully it's this upcoming NBA Finals. But Jayson Tatum made that pass like Anthony Edwards and he botched it. The media would kill him. And then Anthony Edwards saying like I'm tired. Can't say stuff like that because Luka and Tatum they're held to a different standard. So if you want to be on that same level, you can't say stuff like that in the media. So there's my critique, of Anthony Edwards. I still think he's great. As a fan, you don't want to hear that, especially when you're saying, I want to guard Kyrie and then Kyrie cooks you. I think Anthony Edwards' off-ball defense also needs to improve. Again, he's 22. These are things he can work on. I am worried about Anthony Edwards where the media might turn on him next and overly criticize him when the reality is he's 22, and if he goes through some struggles over the next few years in the playoffs, it's the process. Michael Jordan went through the same thing. LeBron went through the same process. Kevin Durant went through the same process. Steph Curry went through that. These guys, they lost in the playoffs, and when their time was up, they showed up. So that's what we're hoping for Jayson Tatum to do. And I just don't like the slander. The man's been in 2 NBA Finals. That does deserve a lot of credit. He played really well, especially in the 2022 run where they needed him in Game 6 in Milwaukee, and he showed out in that game. Was he always consistent? No, but he was also young. And now we're expecting him, because the standards are different, to show up in the NBA Finals. And even if they lose, as long as he is playing well, he isn't disappearing in the fourth quarter, he's making plays and making an impact, then I don't think he's going to get criticized too badly. But if he just disappears like he did in 2022, yikes. That's going to be hard to defend. But 26 years old, just entering his prime. I've seen Jaylen Brown take a different leap this year. So maybe Tatum will do that next year. And that's the scary part because if Boston breaks through this year, prime Tatum could be a serious problem. Hope you guys enjoy this video today. Thanks for sticking to the end. And love to hear thoughts on the Jayson Tatum slander. Do you think it's hypocritical? Do you think some of it's warranted? What are your thoughts on Jayson Tatum? Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you in the next one.